All right, we are live.
So shall I start? Oh, okay. Welcome, everyone.
All right, we are live.
Sabaydi, everyone. My name is Phitsamay Uy, and we are here for our second Thip Khao talk. The purpose of the Thip Khao talk is to open up more dialogue and spaces for discussion about topics and issues that impact the Laotian Americans due to the aftermath of the secret war in Laos. And it's an ongoing UXO issues in Laos. So we want to engage our supporters, our communities virtually to convene and participate in these important conversations and keep our work going in solidarity with our partners from different fields like the academy, arts and culture, our nonprofit organizations, the government, public health, and public policy and health. And so we want to bring greater awareness to UXO issues in Laos and legacies of war mission, as well as the individuals and communities who are impacted by the aftermath. Now, for those of you who don't know, Legacies of War was founded in 2004 following the recovery of a set of original drawings by bombing survivors in Laos during the US Vietnam War era, right? That happened in the 1960s to 1970s. The drawings and the history behind them inspired the formation of the only US-based organization solely dedicated to the raising awareness about the US Vietnam War era bombings of Laos and the vast amount of unexploded ordnances, or UXO, that remains in the country 45 years later. The mission is to raise awareness about the history of the Vietnam War era bombing in Laos and advocate for the clearance of the unexploded bombs and the survivor assistance. It is also here to provide support and space for healing the wounds of war, which is very apropos for this month, and our special guest will talk about that, and to create a greater sense of hope for a future of peace. I got involved with Legacies of War when Chenapal first founded. And so for me, the first time I heard about the secret war in Laos was in college. I didn't even know that I was a result of the secret bombings. And so for those who don't know, in 1963 to 1974, bombs were dropped for every 8 minutes for 24 hours for 9 years. And so it's over 2 million tons of ordnances that were dropped. So I'm holding up Article 2, which is a remnant of that bomb, right, that they've now used to create as sort of souvenirs for people because it's so ubiquitous, it's everywhere. But while this was everywhere in Laos, the knowledge of it wasn't actually shown. And so as a teacher at the time, I was very interested in teaching other students to know about their history and their knowledge. And so in part of that history comes learning about the trauma and the war that's involved. And so today we have a special guest, I'm hoping that I say it right, Dr. Phoukham Kelly Bounkeua, one of the 3 only licensed psychologists in the United States. No, she's shaking her head.
Well, I'm one of the few. I'm not sure what number I am, but
she is a trailblazer, regardless of the numbers that are out there. And we're so excited to have her here to talk about today about trauma and about mental health and its importance because May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, but is also the month for mental health awareness. So welcome, Dr. Phoukham. If you would like to please correct my introductions and tell us about a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in the work that you do.
So, thank you very much for the intro. Having another Lao sister, right? Lao-American sister with a doctorate. I'm just like, I'm really into this woman empowerment and sisterhood. And as you know, our culture is very sisterly, right? You're my sister. I just met you a couple minutes ago and here we are, sisters. And what do you know? 2 Lao sisters having a PhD. That's amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And so my name is Phoukham Kelly Bounkeua. And what is in the name, right? Phoukham, as you know, if you speak Lao, means mountain of gold. And so on the outside, as you know, the very popular poo emoji, the English sound does not sound very good. But one of the reasons why I wanted to sort of understand and sort of reclaim our heritage, just like this interview, is my name is just like it sounds, right? In Lao, it's beautiful, heartfelt. But in English, not the best, isn't it? It's either Winnie the Pooh, which is really nice, or Pooh the emoji, right? So part of it is that Golden Mountain, the story behind the legacy of war, is kind of sort of part of my name as well, is that it's a mountain, right? It's a gold, and we got to sort of understand the story behind it. On the outside, to the English word, doesn't sound great, but it's part of our legacy. It's part of our legacy of being Lao-Americans in this country. And so that's one reason why I agreed to sort of be part of this conversation, because, you know, as part of a field in mental health, and part of the fact that as a psychologist, psychotherapist, I'm often behind the one asking the question.
Yes.
So I want to share that the fact that I'm on here is because I think Legacy of War is doing such an important sort of service to the world and to Laos and to our history of 45 years in America. And we need to talk about these stories, of these resilient stories. And so as much as I'm an extrovert, sharing this story of my own story and what I do is actually harder. And so it's the same thing about conversation about mental health, right? And the trauma that we experience. And so I want you to know that that is part of my authentic sort of heartfelt, right? The gold of a mountain behind everything, the strength. And our story is part of the Lao story. And so part of why I'm here to share this story and to be sort of honored to be part of the guest here. But I just wanted to know that just like anything else with mental health, and to talk about our story is hard, right? And even as a doctor in psychology, it is hard for me to share my story. I tend to be somewhat private in my personal life, but because this is so important, heartfelt, I want to make sure that I'm forefront in telling the story, because there's very few of us, right? You know.
And so I also want to just do a cautionary trigger warning for some of our viewers, because this might be the first time they're hearing the stories. I myself got diagnosed with PTSD as an adult. And so for me, I also get triggered when I engage with this. And so I have a therapist who tells me how to, so you might see me tapping as one of my strategies, but like trauma and feelings, that's not allowed. Like, what is feelings? We don't talk about feelings. We only talk about two things: laughter, right? Good jokes and good fun and good parties, right? But to actually talk about trauma, because we live in this sort of culture of silence, that it might even be hard for people to even register that they are traumatized.
But I also want to sort of clarify the acronym. Not everybody knows what PTSD means, right?
Yeah.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. And I want you to all know that PTSD does not heal just by time, okay? It is healed through treatment. It is healed through sort of talking about these things, because even the Vietnam vets that have done, this is 45, 60, 50 years, right, of being in conflict since 1963, they're still struggling with it. Now that they're retired, they are retired and they're older. And so part of it is PTSD does not stop with time. It does not heal with time. It is healed through treatment and these kind of stories. So I want to sort of clarify that for most people. They think, oh, it'll be fine during time. You've been here for 45 years. Why are not you over it? So there's actually a key to talk about, because especially with the COVID right now and the xenophobia that's happening in the community, there's a lot of triggers. So yes, thank you for that notice, that warning that our talk might trigger people. So we'll talk about some coping strategies as well.
Yeah, including myself. So that's for people who know me, I have my box of tissues just in case. But so do not be afraid of
Psychotherapists always have tissue box.
I know, I got mine right here. So let's start for a little bit of the background. Like, so when did your family come, right? So my family came in 1979. Where did your family come?
Oh, my sister, you and I are so similar. 1979, September 12th, 1979, I believe. Or is it 20? I was corrected. September 22nd, 1979.
July 6th, 1979.
Oh, you got a little bit beat there.
Yeah, we snuck in a little bit earlier. Yeah. So where did you first get settled?
So as you know, a little history, right? We all, our Ellis Island's in San Francisco, right? We all got all checked our paperwork. So if people don't know, a little history for Asian Americans, San Francisco is where you check all your paperwork. Now this is actually pretty good memory. I was 7 when I came. So the fact that I remember this, I want to sort of share the fact that when we are traumatized, our memory is very salient. So you're going to hear me memorize or remember things from even when I was a lot younger, right? That's part of our memory triggers, is that we could remember things that are very meaningful to us. So I remember actually San Francisco was our first place that we landed in. And then we actually lived in San Antonio, Texas. So I'm a little disappointed that I didn't stay long enough for the Southern accent. So I was hoping for that, but I only stayed there for a couple of years, which was a great transition, right? You go from hot weather in Laos and Thailand to Texas, which was, hot still. So very blessed.
No, I had in New England. So thankfully we came in July. So there was summer, then in the fall, and then the winter, we got like this white thing. What is this white thing falling down on us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, because we have Laotians in all of the 50 states, so the experiences geographically is going to differ, right? In terms of like who and how you get settled, whether you came from the Family Reunification Act or if you were resettled with the help of churches, right? And so that's how some of our community members are being settled.
Yeah,
So
we were actually, as you were getting to that, we were actually sponsored by a Mormon church in Texas.
awesome.
Yeah. And then later on, we were helped by the Baptists. So I was introduced to a lot of different faiths I didn't realize as a young child. So at 7 years old, yeah. So, and then later the Baptists helped us. And then it didn't work out as a lot of the stories goes. We actually took the bus all the way, Greyhound bus as a family of 4 at the time. Or is it 5, 4? Can't remember.
Yeah.
We had a nephew, my dad's nephew with us. And so, so a family of 5. I got at the time was my brother, my sister, and my oldest sister was not with us until 10 years later.
Wow.
Like similar stories, right? Like some people can't come all together. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what triggered me was when Trump started separating the families.
Yes.
And so I didn't, because my family never talked about it, right, growing up. And so I didn't realize that my brothers were separated from us. And so when I saw the images of the children being in the cages and so that was my triggering moment. And that's what sort of started me on my PTSD work with my therapist, because it could be latent, right? So that happened when I was 4. Right. And so this happened 2 years ago. 40 years later, I'm being triggered about the family separation. Right. And so sometimes you don't even know when it's going to happen, or you don't even realize it. And so growing up, a lot of times kids don't know that they're in this culture of silence because it just seemed normal. Like when I was growing up, I'm like, oh, what refugee camp did you go to? Because all my friends were in a camp. Right. And then Vermont people are like, we went to YMCA camp. And I'm like, oh, did you stand around and wait for the UN to give you food rations too? And they're like, you are strange, girl. Right. Like, what is that? Right. So what do you think what are the things that that children should start sort of considering to saying that, because people like, is it Lao or is it normal? Right? Like, what are those type of things that you think we could give people to understand that perhaps they too might have some trauma that they might need some help with?
Yeah, so that's a big loaded question, right? So let's go back a little bit, sort of tying in with a little bit of legacy of war, because as you're triggering my memory, right? I was probably so in Laos, I was probably 2 or 3, if my memory serves me right, is that I remember the bombs actually. And they talk about memories not sort of being very clear for kids till probably about 6 or 7 years old. But I clearly remember my grandmother holding me, and we went to sort of a makeshift sort of hole, right, to sort of hide from the bombs. Now, I didn't understand or I didn't realize, even with my Asian American history at UW, didn't realize it was every 8 minutes. So now it makes sense to me after seeing the Legacy of War, the little Land of Mines documentary as well, that I did not realize it was for 9 years, every 8 minutes. Now, so that makes sense with my brain now, sort of fitting the story as a little child, sort of hearing that a lot, right? Because we didn't leave Laos till I was about 3. So I remember sort of hiding with my grandmother in this little hole, right? That was dug, and in our journey to sort of leave in 1975, because the fall of Saigon coincided with us leaving. Like many Lao and Hmong Americans, their family history is that a lot of my dad was one of the people that helped the U.S. soldiers. He was working sort of with them, the CIA, and helping them out. And one of the story that he revealed is that, because of that, he has some inside information that says, you better take your family because you're in danger. They will kill you. They will put you in concentration camp. And so you better take your family. And so I remember him telling me that story. And I remember that journey. I was carried by my grandfather. We barely took anything, just the clothes on our back, because you had to pretend that you were going fishing, right? You weren't going anywhere. You were not packing anything. You were just leaving your home, going fishing at the Mekong River. And the blessing is that Thailand's literally across the border from the Mekong River.
Yeah.
My mother's side, and unfortunately, my birth mother died when I was about 18 months old. Oh, and so we crossed over with my stepmom, who also is on the the Lao side or the Thai side. So we had some family members, right? As some of you may know, 30-40% of lowland Lao live in Thailand, one belongs to Lao. And so part of it is we have a lot of family side there. And so we were able to cross over, sort of blend in, right? And so my dad knew that for a while we tried to sort of simulate and sort of, but you cannot be a Thai citizen.
Yep.
So he knew that we could not sort of be educated, even though we had family there. And so limited for us. So that's when we were able to sort of get into the Thai camps and, have a little bit memory of what refugee camp was like. We tried to go to school there for a little bit. I had no formal schooling. So I think I went to 1 or 2 days to see what the English class was like. And now that I sort of remember taking a little bit of a French class, I think it was actually a French class that was trying to teach us, right? And they were trying to decide, which country to pick to come. If you wanted to come to an easier, shorter time frame from the camps, you might pick countries that are easier to get in. And the US was one of the hardest to get in, right? To find sponsors and things like that. And one of the few pictures I have of my childhood is my refugee picture. The two that I have of my earliest picture. And so part of it is why I love taking photography now, because I don't have any pictures of my childhood. And so my childhood is my refugee picture, one with my family and one with my little name tag that I still have to the day. And so my formal language learning is English. So as you will find out that my first thought and everything is in English. And so my Lao and my ability to speak Thai is limited conversationally, but I understand it. So part of it is part of that our journey, right? So as my mom said, I've had to relearn my Lao and my Thai a little bit to sort of understand it. But as long as you talk to me, I can understand it and speak back when I need to.
Yeah, it's hard, right?
Yeah, yes.
I think so. What I hear you're saying is like when people start thinking about their gaps in their memories, right? Because there's reasons why our brain shuts down because you're in survivor mode. It's survival. Like, what should I do to, because when you are being traumatized, it's being like, for me, when I get triggered, like my body reacts like the initial, right? So like I have to think, talk to myself, like, you're okay, right? Breathing and focusing, and that the gaps in the memory comes at different times in different spaces. But even when I remember, I used to have dreams about that. Like I would have dreams of like soldiers throwing dead bodies into spikes. And so my body would be thrown over, but it wouldn't be pierced. So I would be one of the living amongst these dead bodies and carcasses, right? And so it was just like terrifying, right, to think about as a child. But then when I tried to talk about it with my mother, she was like, oh, that's nothing, right? Versus the memories of being in, like, because I was born in Hoi Sai, about the villages and stuff like that. So anytime I would talk about those dreams, she's like, oh, that actually really happened, because I dreamt that someone had fallen through one of the stairs of the stilts, right, when they were coming to visit us. And she's like, here's the picture. And it was exactly the same person that I had a dream about. And so our memory comes out in our subconscious and sometimes in our dreams, but our families help push it and help repress it down, right? And so even if we want to engage and want to learn, sometimes we can't do that with our own family. And so I feel like when I have friends over, that my mom will tell stories to my friends, but she won't tell stories to us. Like, what do you say to people who like would like to learn more, but don't actually have family members who are ready to talk about something this traumatizing?
Yeah, I think unfortunately a lot of us, and it's a little bit changing a little bit with the generation now, but a lot of us did not learn until we went to college, right, about our history.
Yeah.
It's part of our, and I'm so glad that you brought about the whole idea that, that we don't want to share this, but I want to share that my 24 years of experience providing mental health since I had my master's is about 24 years working with children, adults, couples, pretty much every age group and diversity in our country. And the idea is that talking, it's just a conversation, right? Speaking of talk, this is why I brought my Thip Khao, which Thip Khao is your little thing where you put your sticky rice. I don't have any because I didn't prepare. No one, I wish I had someone to cook me some Lao food, but I don't. But the idea is this is our story. And our Lao culture is so much into sharing of food, breaking bread. And so I want to share that when people come talk to me, it's really just about a conversation you would have over lunch. And so I would actually encourage families to slowly just talk through about food. It's so much about our family. If I was a younger generation, whether it's second or third generation, ask auntie, ask grandma, ask whoever's around to talk about the recipe first, to talk about, I want to learn this. Can I record it so I will remember how to make this food for our family to carry that legacy? Then the older generation is more likely to be open to share it through food. It's not threatening.
Yeah.
And as you say, part of our human brain is all about safety. It is made to protect us, right? And so when we feel alarmed, right? So we feel threatened, the brain, whether it's real or perceived threat, it feels shut down. So part of our safety and resiliency is to shut down the memories of our trauma and our stories until later. When it's quiet and maybe we're doing good. And this is why after 45 years being in America, for most of the Southeast Asians, is that now we're starting able to sort of be able to talk about it because we're feeling safe now. Our brain feels safe. We have food, water, shelter. We speak English. We know the resources. We're Americans, right? And that's part of our identity now. And so there's a different way of feeling safe. And so now it feels safer to share about our food, our stinky padak fermented fish. Now we're not embarrassed to talk about what we had, because some of us didn't have been able to carry that to school lunches, and all these things makes about interesting, but also sort of okay to talk about. If you watch your social media, there's Lao food movements going on, right?
Yes. Lao Food Foundation. Woo, woo.
Yeah, the Lao food movement and all these, the incredible work that is sharing about, because a lot of people have had Thai food, but a lot of people don't realize when you're eating Thai food, that's probably 0.5% of it is actually Lao food, right? It's part of that story. Yes. And so part of that is reclaiming our history, reclaiming our story, because I really, as a provider of mental health, and also sort of my own healing is through the resiliency of our story, our roots. When we're grounded in the story of where we came from, and this is also mental health. This is Mental Health Awareness Month in May, Asian Pacific History Month. So May is a very powerful month, and also a month for mothers. I'm a mother. So it's very nurturing to talk about food. We nurture through food, and so it's part of our culture, but also part of our legacies to remember that, to sort of understand and to respect our resiliency story that is resilient. And what you're doing with your brain to heal is actually rewiring it. There's so many research that you're rewiring it to become a trait, that you become a survivor, you become resilient, you're strong in your story and where you've come from. There's no one like you, and your story should be proud of. And this is why, even though my Americanized name that I got when I became a US citizen in 6th grade is named Kelly. Kelly after the popular Charlie's Angel character. She's badass, kick-ass, private detective, smart and beautiful. And that is my name. And so part of it is being a warrior woman. That's what Kelly means in Irish. And so what isn't a name? Look in your roots. Find out why your name is that, right? And some of us Americanize our name, but that's always a story behind it. And most of our names come from sort of television and actors, right? And so
my mom named me after her favorite Thai actress. So.
Yes, so it's very common pop culture. And so I want people to sort of understand that your story is just a conversation. And that stigma that we have, that it's been piba, and you're crazy when you talk about things that happen to you and you share it. There is an aspect of mental health, it's just a human condition, right? Everybody, has it, has a story, has a struggle, right? The American dream is part of the immigrant refugee story. And so part of it is, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Southeast Asians are the first categorized refugee. Most Asian Americans are actually immigrants. We were the first categorized politically as refugees. And so refugees has a different type of trauma than immigrants. They're different in different ways. And so part of it is that to understand mental health is really to understand that it's just being human. And everybody has a human story, no matter where you are, no matter what color, wherever you are around the world, we all have a story. And that story is your path to healing, right? To get it out. And talking, and a lot of research is like, it's just as powerful or more powerful than medicine, sometimes, depending on what you're dealing with, right? And yes, are there times that you need to take medication because your brain chemistry, right, is part of your brain chemistry, and you might need some medication to help with that. But most of the time, it can be healed through talk with a provider like me, right? That actually is trained to listen.
Yeah. And I just want to encourage the audience members. You have an amazing expert here. So please post your questions in the chat line, and we will have the doctor address those questions in the Q&A portion. But I've got more questions for you while we wait for those to come bombarding in. Okay, so we have lots of communities who's also experienced trauma. How do you think some of the various communities could sort of come together on this issue? Because it's not just a Southeast Asian issue, it's not just an APA community issue. How do we bring people together around this issue?
Well, the fact that the world is going through a pandemic, we are experiencing at the same time the historical human condition of suffering and struggle and unknown. Okay, so going with sort of the idea of mindfulness meditation that comes from our part of the world, right? We're talking about compassion for yourself, number one, right? That's really hard culturally for a lot of people, to sort of learn to sort of have compassion for whatever your story is. It is your story and is the most resilient story that you're ever going to have. And so the part of it is dealing with the pandemic right now is a shared human condition. The common humanity, the common core that we have is this shared experience of struggle. Life has suffering, and this is part of our suffering right now. And so part of it is, as you're bringing this, the pandemic is bringing out, especially with xenophobia, and what's going to trigger for a lot of us, and I've gotten triggered myself during this, is that having people view you differently because you're Asian heritage, right? Not only are we dealing with the pandemic, but now it's traumatizing. It's triggering other trauma. I thought I was done dealing with racism, right? I'm educated. I'm nice. I'm pretty good with people. I thought I was done. No one's going to give me any microaggression because I'm educated and I have resources. That's not true, right? And so what's going to get is triggered. It actually breaks my heart to see people being treated with such sort of, because we're also dealing with fear. That's what's going on right now. We have no idea what's going to happen with COVID a lot of times. And so this unknown makes us scared. But if you've had history of trauma, depending on your story, I'm talking about different types of trauma. It could be all a childhood trauma, it could be family history trauma, war trauma, immigration trauma, whatever trauma you have, you're going to get triggered. And some of us are going to get triggered more. When I first came to America, I don't know about you, but the stereotype was that we all was able to do Kung Fu. So I use that sort of for my benefit, right? Because we're going to get triggered by racism. When they said, go back to your country, all those type of comments that I didn't think I was going to hear anymore. I heard it all the way through college.
Yeah.
So,
it's historically been part of sort of the U.S. American fabric, right? So this racial schema where the Chinese were the first ones, right, to be discriminated. And then over the course of the years from the 1600s to now, that we have always been seen as this foreigner or the disease carrying people. And so it's coming back around again, but now it's this in day and age. People are thinking it's the 21st century. We're post, racial idea. We had Obama for president. So there isn't any racism anymore, but it's not so easily dissected like, oh, just because you have that, you elect one African-American president doesn't mean erases all of the historical systemic oppression and discrimination that we're living in. And so I think it's so true that for you to have everybody think about how are we all being triggered, how we are suffering together. Yeah. And that suffering is so much a part of our Buddhist community, right? So how do you think that we could bring in our spiritual community? Because that's where our families go. You go to the temple, right, to commune and talk and eat and to get together. Is there a connection between our mental health services and any of our temples or churches that people go to?
Yeah, definitely, right? There's of course, in our community, there's various, majority of us are Buddhist, but there's some Christian and Catholic and mixture of all different faiths as well. And so, yes, we, historically, we go to our elders, we go to the Buddhists to sort of have a spiritual conversation with our monks. So that's another sort of analogy is that, monks are like, therapists, actually. They listen to your problem and give you some spiritual guidance or some suggestions based on their lived experience of listening to so many stories and so many people that come to turn toward them. So that's part of our cultural sort of healing as well, is to sort of do that. And one of the reasons why I named my counseling practice Basi. Basi, as you know, is this Thai staring ceremony, right? It comes from, it comes from the faith that we are united 32 wandering souls. We're not, that there's something that something's going on with our souls, right? It's wandering the cosmos. So we tie it back in, and they use that as part of mindfulness meditations to tie, right? Sort of heal. And we say, just like a greeting card, may you be well. And that's part of the mindfulness mantras, right? Is may you be well, may you be healed, may you be safe, may you be healthy. right? And so part of that is part of that healing practice that we do culturally,
Mm-hmm.
but it also is a new sort of 30, 40 years in the making of research of mindfulness meditation.
Right.
I'm actually in my second year and almost done by next year of being a mindfulness teacher, because I really feel like that's part of psychological healing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think Buddha should have gotten the father of psychology, because he was the first to sort of deal how to heal with the mind, right? I really think he should be given the credit to be the father of psychology and the neuroscience of the brain, because he found a way to sort of heal your suffering through just learning how to meditate, to breathe, to understand the common core of humanity that we all struggle with. And so that could be incorporated into your practices culturally as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I know I do it with my students because I'm a teacher. And so for me, for the K-12, there's yoga for classrooms where we even just do basic, like how do you breathe, right? Like breathing has to be taught because we take it for granted. And like we have these shallow breaths when we're under like threat or like fight or flight, versus like you can easily calm yourself down by taking a deeper breath and counting and focusing and just slowing that energy down. Because the mind is an amazing organ that is the only organ that can think about itself, right? Like what other, the heart doesn't say, oh, beat, beat, but the brain can say, what are you thinking about? Why are you thinking that, right? And so it sort of helps people to sort of slow down. Ooh, I see we have questions. I'm going to slow down and say, May Ararad asks, how do we get mental health resources to our communities? How do we get members of our communities to go out and seek services or resources?
First of all, we have to acknowledge that there are limitations. Okay. So first of all, let's look at the bigger mental health. There's a mental health stigma across the world, not just in our own community. So it becomes even smaller. Mm-hmm. So right now I read there's an article that said 40% of people of color are mental health providers in this country, 4%. Mm. So now think about this. I just saw on Facebook, 4%. Yeah, 4%. For Facebook, that someone was asking me to help them with resources who speaks Thai and Lao. Mm-hmm. In my own Asian American Psychological Association, I reached out and emailed anyone Lao out there, anyone Hmong, anyone. Mm-hmm. I got 2 graduate students that are Lao-American. They're on their way to getting their PhD and doctorate degree, but there's so few and many, right? So the only thing we can do right now is look at our existing resources, right? To look at people like there are me, like right now I know of 3 PhDs or women psychologists in our country. And so some of them are teachers and some are not practicing, right? So I have a full-time practice that's very rare. So
where's your practice located?
Oh, in Renton, Washington. So I am in Renton, Washington. Pretty much grew up here all my life and gone through all the colleges here. So very local. And so one way you look at it is that the resource in your community. So if you have insurance, look at your provider, because when we actually write down what we speak, we actually put that down. But I'm going to tell you, because of this is why I'm going to put a little plug for U.S. Census. Please complete your U.S. Census, because even as a provider, when I go down and put down what I speak, sometimes that's not an option for me. I have to email them sometimes 3-4 times and still not done. I said, I speak Lao, I speak Thai, and I can't even find that slot to put in as a provider because there's so few of us. They don't even have it.
So that's a policy
why to put in. Yes, we need to plug in, because the services that you need to find us is still even hard. So look at your insurance. They will tell you who speaks it. And then worst case scenario is you can have access to language banks, interpreters, AT&T. Sometimes there's free services, right? Also, the other thing is if you have state insurance, there's community mental health. Yep. They tend to have the case managers that speak loud. They may not be a master's level sometimes they are, but you're going to find more master's level clinicians that might speak loud, right? In the community mental health clinics, or case managers that can have access to Lao interpreters for you, right? They're going to have more resources, sometimes in the state-funded community mental health agencies. But private practice like mine, we take insurance. So you have to look at your insurance and who has this. But I'm going to tell you right now, during the pandemic, there's already 1,000 increase in calls, 1,000. And what does that tell you? That the pandemic is going to be worse for mental health. So I'm going to encourage you, if you already have any signs or any concerns right now, you have access to mental health care, access a provider, because you might not be able to access them, right? Because it's really hard. A lot of us were full already before we had this pandemic.
Let's break it down for people. Like when you say mental health, like how would I know that I have mental health issues? Like what are the sorts of questions that an individual could ask themselves to sort of discern that, you know what, I actually should get help? Like, so what's
so let me break it down a little bit, because I want to make sure that the stigma is sort of one of my goal is to cure stigma of mental health. the people that I see are just people like you and me. I'm going to tell you that. They're working professionals. That's because they have insurance, right? Working professionals that may have struggles with, let's say their kid is not doing well, right? In school, where there's little kids, right? They might be a little active. They might not be focused, can't concentrate, feel a little sad, a little worried, have stomach problems. A lot of times it's indicating with our gut tells us, oh, I'm not feeling well. Could it be anxiety? Could it be a physical? If you rule out all the physical things about being sick, it might just be I'm nervous, I'm scared, I'm avoiding something.
You know, my mom has for the older people, I've noticed that it's either headaches or loss of appetite.
Yes, very common.
Because they're sort of like psychosocial. We got her tested for all of these medical things, and she's like, she still doesn't understand what's going on. And so for her, it's like right where you said like the food, like if you lost your taste or like you lost your motivation or energy, and you're starting to question like, why aren't I happy? Right? Like I have everything. Why can't I be happy?
Yes. And 70% of the general population go to their regular doctors because of psychological reasoning. 70%. That is why it's so important that the mental, because they screen you for a very short time, right? Yeah. So in ways, I actually, if I, could lobby this, is that I would like people to screen, to go to their dentist twice a year. You can go to mental health twice a year, screen it out. If you don't know, it should be part of your regimen, because 70% of your mental health is related to your physical health. If you're not doing well, think about it, we only have one body. The mind and body is connected. Yeah. So 70% of you, might be stressed about work, for instance, right now. You're worried. Perfect timing. You need to take some time to sort of check that out. It just might be the COVID. It might be just triggering your trauma, or you might be seeing things on social media that triggers you. And you're like, oh, like sometimes I'm part of different groups. And when I see things about, xenophobia, people being attacked, I can't watch that. Right? Or somebody wants me to consult about a child abuse case. At this point, I have children. I don't want to deal with child abuse situation because I don't want to be triggered. I'm worried of my child, those kind of things. So we got to sort of be self-aware. And that's why the body is such an important, this is why I'm really an advocate of mindfulness, because of the fact that your body is telling you, it's medicine says, I'm not doing well. Your gut tells you it's not safe. Your heart tells you your emotion not doing well. Your shoulders, your neck are saying, I'm holding a burden of unrepressed memory or feelings that I can't express, and it hurts there. I've got a headache because I'm thinking about things. I can't sleep. Those are issues right there to think about going to see someone like me, going to your primary care provider to assess that, right? And I want to tell you something that, people go to their primary care doctor, sometimes suicidal, and telling their doctor, but after a month, they commit suicide, right? After a month of seeing the primary care because they feel hopeless, thinking that I went to a doctor and I didn't get help. Yeah. Right? I'm going to tell you, as watching, when my daughters go to the doctors, there's not enough time. They do 1 or 2 screening, maybe a minute or 2, a mental health screening. It is not enough. Yeah. Right. And so come to someone like me, 1 hour just to assess. We could tell if you're like, hey, you can use some touch up. You may not have to go as often, but you might need to, right? Or things might come up. So there's different reasons why, you might need to brush up. And if you have family that has struggled with trauma, and you're being raised by a generation that have gone to PTSD, has never been treated, like our generation, right? Our parents, never been treated, and they're raising us. Of course, right? That triggers that, right?
Yeah, we have what is called second generational trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Like
of trauma, recent research have said that it takes 7 generations to deal with our trauma. It carries. It actually is a gene that transfers through us, our genes. Think about 7 generations. Yeah. Right. If we're talking about our Lao refugee experience, we haven't gone to that many generations yet. Not 3, 4 if we're lucky with the grandkids or something like that. But we're still fairly new. So our trauma isn't over. Yeah. Right. So part of it is I want to think about that it's not something that you think that you should be ashamed of. You should be like a physical health. If you have a broken arm, you don't say, I'm going to take care of myself. I've got this broken arm that's bleeding. I'll just deal with it. Right. Think about that. Right.
So it's you're talking about normalizing, right? Yeah. So like when people are asking themselves like, okay, how you're feeling, and doing this body scan of saying, okay, where does it hurt, right? Yep. And why does it hurt, right? Yep. So for some people, they're so busy trying to survive, or so busy to do the next thing, get their kid fed, to do the at home schooling, all this stuff, that it's almost like we forget that the whole flight attendant, please put on your oxygen mask first before you help anyone else. And if you can't breathe, then that's telling you something right then and there, that if you're not breathing, you're not eating, you're not sleeping, and you're not exercising, then something is going to be off kilter because you're not taking care of yourself. right?
Yeah.
And so that mental health check is part of that whole body holistic scan that I'm hearing you talk about. And so
Yeah,
the more
exactly.
that we can talk about, why don't we just check in with ourselves first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, just to see like what was it that made today go well or what didn't, because those are the type of things that I don't think we teach our children, and we don't teach ourselves. And I know that I certainly wasn't taught that, right? Because as a good daughter, I'm supposed to be helping everybody else. Nobody's checking in to say, hey, how are you doing, Phitsamay? What are you doing? It's always like give. And that's I think a common thing for a lot of women, especially women of color who are in sort of these professions like psychology and education and are involved in their community. But I think that what ends up happening is then we carry the brunt, right? Like we have this emotional trauma along with also the physical trauma of trying to uphold all of our standards.
Yeah, also part of our cultural, not only as women, but our Lao culture, our Asian culture tends to be sort of, it is, you're supposed to sacrifice, you're supposed to take care of everybody else, right?
Mhm.
Very interdependent culture. And so part of that self-compassion is really hard as a mom, as essential workers out there, healthcare workers, we are the last.
Yeah.
But the world needs our brilliance, right? And needs our compassion right now.
Yeah.
And so if you are someone who's very kind, self-compassion, caretakers, have so many different roles, the world needs more people like us.
Right.
Okay. So we need you, the first one, to be your own hero, take care of you, acknowledge that, yes, I'm stressed. It's okay. Because you also tend to be the holders. Here's a lot of research that talks about that. We feel other people's pain.
Yeah.
Our neurons. That is part of our gut and our body to know that someone else is hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when we feel other people, sometimes we can't sleep. So sometimes we don't know if it's ours or theirs. It could be a mixture, right? So right now with COVID, a lot of people have restless sleep right now, right? And without sleep, we're going to be irritable. We're going to be anxious, right? It starts with sleep.
And as an empath, like when you said that, I was feeling it, right? So my body started tingling, my eyes started watering, right? And so even just hearing about the care and that we have to take on. And so for some of us, we don't even have the option to say, oh, I'm going to care, because our body physically reacts to those things. And so it's really hard, and we don't teach I think our children or our community enough to do those body scans and say, okay, you're okay. Maybe you need to take some time and just to, sit and just look up at the sky, or just to do nothing, to just breathe, because that seems like such a luxury when you're in survival mode, especially with the COVID and the pandemic too.
Let's take a pause just even for a second.
Yeah.
I reminded what you just said.
I love that.
Yeah. Just even as a monk, right? He would say, if you don't have time, you're so busy, take a breath. You and I just talked about some very heavy stuff. Just scanning your body, just as you are, feeling the seat below you, feeling just sitting here in your body, right? Taking that just that moment to pause, because of just this moment alone, you're seeing what your body's telling you, right? Are you reacting to something? What are you noticing? One breath in, one breath out. Follow that breath in and out. So, Dr. Phitsamay, so what is that feeling, even just 1 second of just taking a pause? What does that feel like?
It's just amazing. It's just like if you're going Mach 90, and that's the speed that I'm normally on, right? Because I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about, there's a question from Anna, and then I'm making sure that we're getting to you, right? So my brain is like, then, but my body.
I have this little mindful monkey. Our mind wanders. I teach a little bit with kids and adults. Our mind is always wandering, jumping one thing to the next, right? And the metaphor is that what you're doing is feeding the monkey with that pause, with that breath, with that acknowledgement that I'm human and that stress is part of the normal thing, right? There's a TED Talk that talked about stress is actually our friend. It's trying to tell you that something's going on, so listen. Yeah. So when you ignore me, the monkey's like all over the place. Stop ignoring me, Phitsamay. Stop, right? Focus right here. You're talking to Dr. Phoukham right now. Just be here. Be here right now.
I'm feeling
the only time that's happening, right? Yeah. So the other gratitude monkey that I always talk about is gratitude, right? It goes with our story. The monkey, the gratitude is our daily gratitude that we talked about. And right now, I'm very grateful that you're such a great conversationalist and you're making me feel so warm and welcome. This is an example of what therapy is about, everyone. It is that feeling at home that someone hears you, validates your feelings, and it's just amazing to be heard. As humans, we want to be seen and heard, right? And the gratitude that you heard my story, you listened, right? And it's okay to have my story, right? Because it's important to me, right? And so part of that is that daily gratitude that we have, but that self-acknowledgement and awareness that you're like, wow, right? I'm stressed today. Or sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling. And that's the numbingness. All that is part of our human DNA to take care of us. So listen to it.
Yeah.
Right? How do you feel when someone pays attention to you?
Oh, I feel like I'm feeling cared for. Then, yeah, and I'm feeling heard. So I'm feeling seen. Like there's a humanity and a connection there.
Yeah. Oh, that is your coping skill that you have with yourself every single day if you want to access it. Right? Hearing yourself, number one, hearing others, right? Just listening is the greatest gift that we can give. Timeless, priceless, right? The time and the attention you can give someone to be heard, to be seen. That is what my living is basically made of. I'm a good listener, right? You know, and so part of that is listening to someone, but listening with your body. What are you reacting? Just listening. And sometimes you don't have to say a word. Just that pause. That's what I wanted to do. Just that one little pause, because we talked about a lot. When you talk about something heavy or just listening, just sit. Don't have to say a thing. Just breathe.
Yeah.
Right? That's it.
What an amazing gift, right? To breathe, to give yourself that time and space.
Yeah. And when you're breathing, you're never alone. Sometimes we feel alone in our problems, but just that breath is so subtle. When you pay attention to that quietness, you're never alone. I call it BFF for life. So breathe first for life. That is your BFF.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, BFFL, your BFF, just like the young people say, that's my BFF, right? You breathe first for life. You're never alone in your story and in your pain and your struggle, because you got this. You've been breathing a long time, girl. Like, you know,
my first breath and hopefully not going to be my last. So.
No, right? But as you know, for instance, I'll give you an example. When we have a problem, we Google that problem, and guess what? Somebody's already asked it. So that gives you sort of an idea that there is so many things that we as humans, we share the same question, same pain. Like the fact that someone asked that question, I bet thousands of people want to know the same question that you're asking right now on our chat line.
Yeah. So Anna's asking, minorities all have different types of trauma, and it seems like there are tensions among each community in comparing each other trauma. I call it oppression Olympics sometimes, right? As well as using different stereotypes against each other. Different ethnic groups are even more racist towards one another. What's the best way to close the gap between the minorities, especially right now with COVID-19?
Wow, we've got some smart questioners. My goodness, you guys just hit out of the ballpark. I love that. I love that, because it's such an important question. I'm going to just tell you, for someone who probably could have double majored in ethnic minority ethnic minority studies and ethnic minority specialist as a mental health provider, I'm going to tell you that part of it is it goes back to our human DNA. Just like when you're in high school, who do you gravitate to? People that's similar to you. It's based about trust, right? It's just about trust and familiar. So when we feel someone's different from us, we're going to target them because they feel like a threat to our brain, right? I was just I'm going to do a shout out to holleratU.com. They just did a webinar about how to deal with 5 steps to deal with aggression and racism and xenophobia. Great organization. And I was just on there, a couple of their webinars, and it was just amazing. The idea that we cannot be a silent bystander, especially as Asian Pacific Americans or minorities in this country, that we need to support each other, right? The idea is that we all come from our history. And if I could do a sort of thing, basically do a food truck for every culture and every food, because if you like my food, you're less likely to hate me, right? And so part of it is that I think part is that we should come together as people of color, as humans, period, but as people of color to know that we probably likely share a human experience. And the universal law that actually says, if you sit next to someone, like today, I just met you, we have the same birthday month, right? We're about the same age, and we both have a degree. So, and we're both loud, and we're like, ooh, probably love thumb home too, right?
Yes.
So part of that is that we all have a universal human code. So when you don't want to be a silent bystander when you see something happening to someone else, you can do so many different ways. For instance, that look at the common humanity, observe. I bet they have something in common with you. The fact that you're merely being with them in that space, you share something in common, right? But not just that, but the common humanity is that you have a family, I have a family, we want to go home to, right? Every single night, we want to go home to our families, our loved ones. So there's a lot of commonality that you can focus on to bring minorities together. And the fact that you share, a lot of times you're being discriminated by someone. We don't have to target someone. We don't have to wait, right? There's a lot of narrative that we think that the first time, oh, finally, Asian Americans, you guys are being targeted. No, we have been targeted for centuries, just like you. It is the saddest story of time about being human, right? Unfortunately, if you really understand and read history, you realize that we have discriminated against each other through the sort of end of time. But we could change that narrative. We have so many resources and so many things that we don't have to fight amongst each other, right? Just like with COVID, with hoarding and stuff like that. When someone hoards, for instance, something or material, buys something out, the brain is triggered. I watch you hoard some toilet paper. I'm like, oh, there must be running out. I better get some too. So I'm going to put some more in my cart because you're going to take all the tamahong and all that. So I'm going to get some too.
Paper. How is hoarding toilet paper going to save us?
I know, right? Well, if we eat a lot of tamahong, we might need toilet paper.
I know.
So part of that is just always go back to our survival. This is part of the human DNA, that the brain doesn't know what's real or not. It just remembers that it's a threat to us, right? So show compassion to yourself and others is probably the key to resiliency and healing and trauma. Self-forgiveness for mistakes. We are not perfect human beings, right? Even I'm being vulnerable right now, even though, like I said, I'm very extroverted, but inside to share this and to be natural this, it is not easy for me. But when something is important to me, my passion and my ability to speak up, whether it's in class, whether it's in advocacy, that's what Legacy of War is advocating for us. And we need to talk to our legislators, our congressmen, and they're great about having a preset letters to email your Congress, your legislators, and all those things. And I have been at Capitol Hill in my state and in Congress recently in Washington. We need to speak up with 45 years of the Southeast Asian deportation issues right now affecting our community. So there's so many reasons, right, with the xenophobia. So we can no longer be silent, right? The people that you see out and about trying to do this, support them. If you can afford a cup of coffee, because that's how much coffee is, and thank you, Starbucks appreciates your generosity, but Legacy of Work would like to use one cup of coffee, $8 or $9 after tip, right? And $9, $1 for every year that you have had bomb in Laos. I think we're worth $9, $1 for every year. And if you can give a little bit more, do a Lumbong circle. I want to dance with me and everybody, Legacy of War. Let's do some Lumbong, which is the Lao dance. Let's smile, let's join together, right? And part of it is, it's part of our culture that we don't talk about our emotions. I'm gonna tell you, I always smile at these Lao functions and dances, right? We're doing our Lumbong, but as soon as we hit the floor, think about our emotion. You witness some people have this straight face. We don't express our emotion. When you talk about joy, sometimes we express joy, but even then, we reserve it. Have you ever noticed the typical traditional taking a picture? It's no smile, very straight, like we're taking a sort of a passport picture or something.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Or when we're dancing, we're so excited to go dance, and and then all of a sudden we're just like, I'm like, where is that happiness?
Gotta keep the face of the family.
Yes, and being as extroverted as I am, being Lao-American, they're like, what is going on with her? She's way too much energy for me.
Too expressive.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you, it is a universal feeling to express joy, happiness, sadness, fear, disgust. All those things are part of our human DNA. Show it, express it. Because when you don't, it sits inside like tar in your heart and it weighs you down. I call it invisible bag of poop. You're carrying it around stinky, right? And it's just holding you back. It's invisible. No one sees it. But you're carrying that load all the way with your trauma, your lack of forgiveness, your anger, your stereotypes, whatever it is that you're holding yourself back, right? So part of it is let go, drop that backpack, feel how light it is. Ooh, yeah, right? I'm going to smile. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to cry. Whatever the place allows me to be. I'm going to dance. Whatever makes me joy right now is what I'm going to do, right? And we only have one short life. We think it's pretty long, but it's not. It's a very short life. And just like the fact that right now COVID makes us shut down, what is really important? Everything that we thought we had to do out of obligation of fear or what people think or what people wear or the brand names or this or that, where did it go? aren't we all in our like yoga pants and t-shirts every single day with a
I am yoga baby.
Natural beauty is all what my husband always calls it. Natural beauty.
Okay.
Natural beauty.
So what a gift you have given us, Dr. Bounkeua. This has been an amazing, I can't believe that we're already closing up our hour. So for those of you who joined us, we'd appreciate your feedback on the topics. Recommend other topics that you think that the Thip Khao talks should be about, and let us know. So highlight it in our Facebook, share this with other people who you think should hear all the important things that Dr. Kelly has been telling us about. And remember what she says, remember to breathe, the BFFL, breathe first for life. Take care of yourself. This is a time that the whole world is hitting pause, but this is a pause for a reason, because there's so much that's going on right now. And so we need you to take care of yourself. Our community needs you. Legacy needs you. We've already had some great recommendations that if you can give, whether that is $5, $10 a month to be part of the Lâm Vong Circle, so you can party and play it loud, right, with us, or you can write to your congressional staff. And so maybe you want to send a letter to your Congress to tell them about the unexploded ordinance left over in Laos, and that's the way you give. But we first want you to take care of yourself and to know that you are an important member of our community, and we want to hear from you. We want you to be healthy, and we want you to get the help. And if there are no services in your area, contact us through the Legacies of War, and we will gladly connect you with some resources that we know that are, because we're part of our national network. Later on tonight, Alana is having another community forum at 8 o'clock. Join us then. They're going to be talking about COVID and the impact. So there's many groups for you to connect with. So we want you to stay connected. We want you to be here, and we thank you so much for the time and attention you've given with us. Khop-chai lai lai. And I look forward to our next one where we can actually get on the dance floor. When we're no longer social distance and we can be socially close. But thank you everybody for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you soon again.
Yeah, if you follow Dr. Phoukham page, you'll get some coping strategies and articles as well. And I'll start a series on Dr. Lao Hour to start talking about more mental health and reduce stigma. So that's a Facebook page, an Instagram. So I try to do, one of the reasons I came up with that is because there was a Lao mom that spoke about her son dying, of suicide with bipolar. And so seeing that, I was like, you know what, we need to do something. And so part of that is one of the reasons why I reach out a little bit more social media present is because we need to talk about this, right? And so there's a lot of coping skills that I put on my page for everyone, right? And if I can be of help of some kind, or if there's topics or concerns, like I said, I have experience with all ages. And so I want to be a resource to you and on my page and help everyone out if I can. So share this page with everybody, share this video, right?
Facebook, Instagram, tweeting, LinkedIn, do a TikTok dance with this and call it the Lâm Vong Circle. Whatever you need to do, we'll be here to help celebrate you in our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Khop-chai lai lai.